Okay, here we go. We are live. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We're Coffee with Aliens at the Movies, a film education and review channel. If this is your first time here, please consider subscribing, or if you haven't already done so, by clicking on the subscribe button, which is in the description box below.
I'm Steve Chambers. I'm a writer and actor.
And I'm Robert Bellissimo. I'm an actor and an acting teacher. And we have today special guest is Vanessa Buttino. Sorry, I almost got that wrong. From Vaughan, which is very near Toronto. Fellow Torontonian, and she's a writer and a major film buff, which is great. So talking to us about classic horror and all things Halloween movies. So Vanessa, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you guys for having me on your channel.
Yeah,
I am looking forward to this chat. So looking forward to it.
Oh, so am I. You have no idea. This is my jam. And so right off, I wanted to say, it's interesting. Like, one of my gateways into just old movies in general, for me, when I was a kid, were horror movies. I found, I think it was the classics. It was all the Universal stuff, right? Like Dracula, The Mummy, Frankenstein. For me, it was The Wolfman, though. For whatever reason, that was my thing. But then as a kid, like, oh, that made me okay with black and white, and now I will watch more of it. But I wanted to ask you, what is your first memory of a horror movie, any horror movie? And then why horror? Like, why did that become that's your thing?
Okay, so my first memory with horror movies is actually Dracula from 1931. It was the first scary movie I'd ever seen, and it was actually one of the first classic movies I'd ever seen. And it's thanks to my aunt, Grace, who introduced me to old movies. And I had never seen a black and white movie before I sat down and watched Dracula. That was the first one. So not only did that movie kickstart an entire lifetime's worth of passion for classic movies, but it also kickstarted my love of classic horror. Not so much modern horror, like that. Modern horror tends to scare the crap out of me, but I'm good with classic. I'm good with classic horror. I can take that. But yeah, it's Dracula from 1931.
And is Dracula and then vampires like more like I said earlier, for old movies, old horror movies, it's the Wolfman for me. Is Dracula your thing?
Yes. So when I was 6 and I watched Dracula, I wanted to see every single vampire movie and every single movie with the name Dracula in the title. So a few years later, when I was 10 years old, and Bram Stoker's Dracula came out, and that was in 1992. Dude, my parents took me to the theater to watch that movie at 10 years old. So that just tells you how obsessed I was with horror.
That's amazing.
And with vampires.
That's the first movie I saw with subtitles. That movie made subtitles okay. Yeah. Yeah. I was a kid. I love that one. I have that one. So, but your fascination's primarily like older, and I was looking at your list. I've seen a lot of your favorite horror films, and they are like considered the pre-code, predominantly Universal, produced by Karl Lemley, I think is how you say his name.
Yeah, that's right.
So, at what point did you get to the horror movie where you went, yeah, no, I'm going to stick with those guys?
I think it was after I went to go see Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's when I started kind of experimenting with Friday the 13th and all those kind of movies. But no, those were just too much for me.
It's a different thing.
They're totally different styles. And I don't know, I can't pinpoint exactly what turned me off about those movies, or not even necessarily turned me off, but what scared the shit out of me with those movies. I can't pinpoint what that is. I cannot watch them. Yeah, I've tried many times. I've tried many times to watch them, and I just can't. I can't sit through them.
I get it, but they are so different. Like under the horror umbrella, there's so many subgenres.
Yeah.
And the slasher film, whatever. To me, that was always kind of comic book. The stuff you were more interested in, I do find eerier for sure. Like the mood, the stuff that isn't in your face, for my taste, stuff that sits in my mind, not jump scare stuff, but just more like that
Unsettling.
that
Unsettling.
Well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm gonna throw it to Robert. You got some stuff?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Steve, because I wanted to ask you specifically, like, because this genre has evolved so much from from literally 1895 to the present. I mean, can you give the audience a brief history of how it's evolved from Dracula 1931 to now, where, as Vanessa said, it's like they're unbearable. Some of them are so not unbearable that they're bad, scary to watch. What's the general evolution here?
I think it's just figuring out what audiences liked and like, okay, can we go a little further with that? And somewhere in there, though, early on, I think they realized, okay, creepy. Jump scares. I think the 1948 Cat People, which I love, which was produced on such a low budget, they couldn't afford.
I gotta see that still. Yeah,
it's great. They relied on sound and jump scares and the pacing. And I think when they realized, mood works, and we don't need to just give you the classic Gothic stuff based on the book. I think it kind of came from, I'm not sure where it split off, because you start to get everything from not just monsters. I know by the 50s, with the fear of like atomic weapons, we had like giant spiders and Martians and all this stuff. And then I don't know. And then somewhere in the 60s, they figured out the devil. And we'd seen the devil in movies in a way, but really with Rosemary's Baby and then The Exorcist.
Yeah.
That, like, fuck, like that changed everything. And I don't think that stopped insofar as supernatural horror goes.
Right.
Yeah, and then you had somewhere in there, I don't know what started. I mean, a lot of people say Psycho started the slasher movie, I guess, in a way. But to me, when you think slasher, I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre probably started that, and then Halloween. But going back to your thing, like, I don't really know why horror, I think, went as far back as some of the first stuff ever filmed, like Dancing Skeletons, and then by 22 with Nosferatu, that which is based that it is Dracula, but just not officially. And I don't know. I think just with like any industry, like, okay, that worked. What else can we throw in the mix? I don't know.
Right. And you touched on, like, because the politics of the time also really influenced the horror genre, like like you were saying, like the Cold War. Is that when like Invasion of the Body Snatchers came out? Like you were saying, like things that were gonna like take the world, and
it's like the mid-50s. And the McCarthy witch hunt era, absolutely, stuff like
that. The paranoia. I guess that's kind of how the psychological horror really started to evolve. But you know what? I there's actually a great. I think I sent it to you, Steve, but I can send it to you, Vanessa. It's like a 12-minute YouTube video, which is kind of just a glimpse of really nice summary of how it's evolved. And for anyone who's watching, who doesn't know, a lot of it, like you said, Steve, came from what they learned from like low budget films. You had what they like Luden is it Luden? I believe in the 40s, right?
Luden?
Yeah. Val Luden, like, they had him do like these B movie, low budget, and he made Cat People and a lot of these really scary movies of the time. And then they even in Japan, America learned a lot from the Japanese horror and the low budget, then the independent films, a lot of the ones in the 70s and 80s, but then it always kind of had it become parodied, and it would go back and forth. And in the 90s, you have the Scream films, and so it's pretty interesting how I'm probably not doing it justice, because I just watched the the 12-minute clip, but I'll post it in the description box below because it's a nice look. A lot of what you said, Steve, is really in that 12-minute clip here. But it's quite fascinating how this whole genre has, and the subgenres, like you said, slasher film, and how it's evolved. Though this is something for both of you. I could start with Vanessa first. I mean, because this is a genre I know very little about. So when people are interested in the horror genre, I mean, is it simply to get scared, or is it like a roller coaster ride in that sense, or is there more to it than that for audiences?
I think it depends on the audience, like each person in that audience, and the mood they're in. So I know for me, if I want to raise my adrenaline, I'll watch a horror film. Or even if I want to see something very stylish, I'll watch classic horror, because the horror films from the 1920s and the 1930s are very, very stylish. They're very elegant. Yeah. There's a style to them that really stands out to me. So if I'm in the mood to explore design and cinematography, I'm going to go for a horror movie. So I think it's really what you're in the mood for and how much you want to be scared. I mean, some people, they go watch a horror film because they just want to have the pants scared off them. And horror, it's fascinating because what you were saying before about that 12-minute clip, I think the horror genre is the one that's evolved the most over time compared to any other film genre.
I think that's true. Yeah. I think that's true. When you say stylish, like, you're interested sometimes to look at the style of the film. What are you touching on the fact that they had to be quite inventive because of the censorship back then? Is that what you're interested in by style, or is it something else?
No, it's okay. So if I'm talking about the German films like NOSFERATU and the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, there's a distinct style to those films. Okay, so and that was even before the code came into place. Mind you, the code was only really for Hollywood films. So if you take into account Dracula, Frankenstein, and The Mummy, which were all made before the production code started being enforced, it's just the feeling of the film. For instance, The Mummy, it's such an elegant movie. When you watch it, it's just, the set design is incredible. The costumes are incredible. The way even the actors stand or performed in front of the camera was so stylish. And we just don't get that anymore. We don't get that anymore. So it's not like they were being censored, because they weren't being censored at the time. It's a totally different style compared to your slasher film or your paranormal film or whatever, right?
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. So just looking at that list you sent back to the classic period, which you know well, you mentioned Dracula, the Mummy, Frankenstein, The Old Dark House, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Freaks, The Black Cat, History of Dracula, and House of Wax. So out of these, which ones? What is it about these films in particular that stand out to you the most? Is it a lot of what you said, or is there more to it than that?
It's a lot to do with the design of the film. It's a lot to do with the cinematography of the film, the lighting, and it's a lot to do with the personalities you see on screen. Come on, Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, Dwight Fry, even. It's when I'm watching these films, my eyes are glued to those actors and actresses. You cannot look away from them. And their performances over the years have become so iconic, right? Yeah, that the reason why a lot of film lovers tune into these movies is to see those people. So for me, it's just a combination of everything. The end result of these films is just, you can't beat them. You just cannot beat them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But just touching on the way they would, like, I watched Dracula the other night. I haven't seen it since I was a kid, but you know, obviously they I know that this is pre-code, but they didn't, you know, show him actually biting anyone. Like as he was going in, they would cut away, or you would see him just lie down with them, so you know what's going on. I mean, I mean, do you think that? And either of you can answer this. I mean, was that intentional on their part to not show it because it would be too bloody or gruesome at that, even during pre-code? Or
just because you can do something doesn't mean you have to. And I imagine back then, the idea of being gratuitous, it wasn't like we can do it, but we want to save on money. I think it's like, why would that's not the world we're going for? And it wasn't even a thought. No one did that. I think that was it. Like, I know what you mean. Like, you could do it, but and maybe Vanessa knows at what point someone finally went, hey, you know, we could actually show a knife going through skin. Like, I don't know when that started, but like you say, you could do that, but it would take away the class. Like, what a different movie that would be.
You know what? Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think that, like you said, Steve, just because you can do it on screen, why should you? Because half the time, or even more than half the time, what's going on in here is scarier than what you're watching on the screen.
Well, that's right. Yeah. And you see that, and Hitchcock was sort of the master of that. Of course, the shower scene, but in Psycho. But obviously, so many filmmakers before were you see that in Dracula and NOSFERATU. I watched last night as well.
Yeah.
And you don't actually see, and they wake up, they have the bite marks, and it's spooky, right? But it's like you said, Vanessa, it's all the
and
it's your imagination. Yeah.
I think the turning point was maybe Hammer Films. So Hammer was based out of the UK. And when they started with Dracula, but in North America, it was released as Horror of Dracula. That was released in 1958. That's when you started seeing biting, blood, stabbing. I think Hammer turned it around, because before Hammer films started in the late 50s, you didn't see too much blood on screen. You didn't see vampires actually biting people. There was no physical contact. But I think
that is the turning point. I think you nailed it. And just really quick, like you guys, that's good, because I do find, like, whatever I see is going on in my mind, like in the scene, if something happens behind a closed door, but if the camera stays on the closed door, I'm having a nightmare.
Because it's what you're imagining.
Shock, but then there's a release. And like, people believe in, Texas, different genre of horror, but Texas Chainsaw Massacre, believe it or not, if you've seen it, and I've seen it many times, the memory is like, it's the most violent movie you've ever seen. There isn't one on-screen stabbing, chains, nothing. But you think you saw the most vicious film ever, because precisely what Vanessa
that's the one from the 70s, right, Steve?
Yes, but just because of camera movement. And what you were saying about, like, the old different style, but the camera does so much that you don't need to rely on the graphic stuff. You think you've seen more than you've seen, and that's art to me.
Yes, completely. And the soundtrack has a lot to do with that too, because the music is what gets your heart rate up, right? Along with the camera movements.
Right.
100%.
Right.
100%.
Absolutely. 100%. But before I ask my next question, I just wanted to say hello to some of the people watching who are commenting, who I know also know Vanessa, and I've spoke to fellow movie YouTubers. Nathan Jones and Cinema Dave is watching, so hello to you guys.
I love those guys.
And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask. And hello to Ian Banks.
Ian's great.
Watching. Yeah, cat people he loves, and the something. Oh yeah, Vampira. Is it Vampira? I'm not sure if it's Vampira or Vampira. the
Vampire.
Karl Dreyer. I've been meaning to watch that because I love Dreyer.
That's a different kind of
yes.
film. It's
Right.
good, but it's very different.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's considered a horror, right? Or
Yeah. I think Criterion released it. It's in a nice digipack, but
yes,
I
yeah.
watched it. I watched that one for the first time last year on TCM, and I went into it thinking it was going to be similar to those early vampire movies like Nosferatu and Dracula, but
Right.
God, no, it was totally different, and it totally took me by surprise. So that's a neat little film to watch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to. Have you seen that, Steve?
Yes.
You have, eh? Okay, yeah.
It's
I'm
different.
gonna-
Yes.
I love the word different.
That's
It's
all
different.
we're
We
going to
don't.
say about that.
Come on, it's Dreyer.
Yeah.
Okay, you one thing you just mentioned, Vanessa, Nosferatu, and I watched that last night. Do you know why the cinematography was changing? The colors would change so much. Do you know why that was?
Do you mean the tinting, like the color tinting?
Yeah.
Well, I think, I'm not sure, so don't quote me on this, but a lot of silent films, especially in the early to mid 1920s, were recorded outside. Because back then, I mean, studio systems didn't even really exist. So there was no lighting. There was no microphones anywhere because obviously there was no sound. So a lot of films were filmed outside in natural light. So when you're filming a horror movie, a lot of the action that you're watching on screen is supposed to be taking place at night. So if you're filming outdoors, how are you supposed to portray nighttime? So what they used to do was put a tint on the actual reel or the
I
film.
didn't know that.
Yeah, they did it in the editing process. So this was all done in post-production. So they would put a tint, like a blue tint or a dark purple tint, so that the viewer, the audience thinks, okay, this is at night now.
I see. I didn't know that. I was wondering. I was like, it's funny, right? Like Steve and I were talking, even like in other films, how people thought things were innovations. Like, oh, this must have been an artistic choice, but it's like, no, we just had to do it.
It's very practical. It was a practical solution. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, back in the early 20s, people have to remember that they were just starting out back then. So they were starting with nothing. They were literally just starting with a wooden set, a group of actors, no costumes. Actors just wore their own clothes, and one camera that was static. It couldn't move. There was no rolling cameras or, different angles that you could film at. So they were starting from scratch. So yeah, they were filming outdoors. And how are you supposed to portray a night sequence when it's blazing sun outside? So yeah, they put the tints in.
That's interesting. Okay, I didn't know. Have you seen that one, Steve? Nosferatu?
Pardon me?
Yeah, a few times. They showed that to us in school.
Okay, yeah.
Reason. Yeah, I saw that when I was really young. I've seen it since. Yeah, it's Dracula. But just
it's based. They just changed the name, right? I'm just gonna read it.
They took the story without getting the rights, and I forget. I think they got sued by the Bram Stoker's estate, right?
Yes.
And then Universal later got the rights and made Dracula.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, when they were making Nosferatu, it was actually Stoker's wife who sued the production company. And that's why they couldn't title it Dracula, or they couldn't use the Dracula name for anything. So they had to use Count Orlok. Yeah.
I see. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I just want to read a couple of the comments. Nathan Jones is saying, the eerie imagination of those early vampire films really speak to what we think would happen. I think something like Hitchcock and Les Diaboliques from Clouseau really brought about the blood. What do you guys think of that?
I think, and that's around the same time as Vanessa said that the Hammer films were coming out. I think that's true. Like, that's a good point. Like Hitchcock in Psycho, you don't see knife enter flesh, but god damn it, it's pretty close. And you do see blood. So yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the first ones to show that. Yeah, I guess so. I hadn't ever given that thought till today. Like, when did that start? But definitely for vampires, I'd go with what Vanessa said, the Hammer films. Definitely.
Right. And then he goes on to say, I think Vanessa was right about Hammer horror being the first. Good on them. I love Hammer. Loving this production talk. All right. Well, thanks, Nathan. Keep the comments coming. Okay, so let me ask you, Vanessa, for people who, maybe have only watched modern horror, and the gore and the blood and where they show everything, and they say, I don't like those old movies. They're not scary. They're cheesy now. Why should I watch it? What would your pitch be?
Okay, first I'm gonna say that I know that classic horror isn't for everyone. So,
right.
For instance, for example, take Dracula. It's a very, I don't want to use the word boring, but it's a slow-paced film. There is hardly any action. There's hardly any soundtrack. So you should not, modern horror fans should not go into watching classic horror films with the mindset that they're used to. So you should not go into watching these movies expecting to see blood or action or horrific sequences, because that's not what you're going to get. So if you go into watching a horror film thinking that way, you're going to be disappointed. So I think if you would like to explore classic horror, keep an open mind. Be ready to watch something that's very elegant, like Steve said, that's very classy, because this is a totally different type of horror. The first time actually that I watched The Mummy from, I believe it's 1932 with Boris Karloff. Guys, I hated that movie. I thought it was the most driest, boring movie I'd ever seen. But on every rewatch since then, and I actually rewatched it last week, it's now like my number 2 classic horror film. So for me, it's even surpassed Frankenstein. You have to go into these movies with an open mind. That's what my pitch would be. And you know what?
That's a great answer.
Yeah, just keep an open mind, and you may like it, you may not. Classic horror isn't for everyone. It really isn't.
What about you, Steve? What do you think?
Her answer was classy, because I would have said something like, stop
classy
answer. YouTube videos and watch an old movie. Just get it together. But her thing's better. So go with that.
Steve wants to scold them instead.
Yeah.
Your kids don't know what you're talking about.
It's black and white. Oh, fuck.
You know what? If you had asked me that question 10 years ago, I would have been like, oh, fuck off. Just watch it. If you don't like it, you don't like it.
Where I'm still at.
But now I just, you know what? It's not for everyone, and that's okay. We all like different things. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right, absolutely.
I think there's everything wrong with that, but okay.
Was there other?
That's a good answer.
Was there any other movies from that period that really stand out to you, Vanessa, that you'd like to touch on, that you'd recommend?
Yeah, there's one here that I have. Just let me figure out this camera angle. So this is The Old Dark House.
Oh yeah, I just watched that.
Yeah, this
me
is.
Too.
So here's Boris Karloff, and this is actually made by the same director as Frankenstein. So James Whale, and James Whale worked with Boris Karloff again, and this was released the same year as Frankenstein, so 1932. Or sorry, no, the year after, because Frankenstein was 1931. So this is a great film. It's very spooky. It's very eerie. Again, there's no blood in it. There's no really action in it to speak of, but it's what's implied. That's what scares you. Yeah. And Gloria Stuart, a lot of people are just familiar with Gloria Stuart from Titanic. So here you see her as like a 20-something-year-old, and she looks gorgeous. She was gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that was
I thought that movie was so good.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic movie. It's a nice little movie to watch on a stormy night. And it's so entertaining. It's so entertaining.
I love the first shot when you see,
like the title. It's an old dark house. Like, yes, and you've got it, and it's raining, and there's a creepy mute butler, and I'm like, yes, and it's hysterical intentionally. It's not, you're not laughing at it. Like, it's got a sense of humor. And
yes,
Charles
it does.
Laughton's in it. No, it's a really, really good movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love. Sorry, I always get Lugosi and
Karloff.
Karloff. I always get those two guys confused. But when you first see his face when he opens the door, and I mean, you know, it's like, who the hell would go in, right?
Yeah. I'd be running in the other direction no matter how hard it was raining outside.
You know, like I know it's raining, but look at this guy's face, you know. Like,
no. He'd answer the door and you'd be like, no.
I'm good.
I'm good. I'll just wait.
Yeah, I'll go wait in the car.
And it's not only him that's creepy. The whole family there.
Everyone.
Oh my God! What a cast of characters, eh? And you just don't get that in modern film.
Just the older woman, I forget her name, just eating at dinner. And there's just a shot of her eating. And I'm like,
yeah, it's creepy.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good.
You know, what's occurring to me from this discussion that you know, do you think these films needed? Like, I think now you could rely so much on special effects and blood and stuff to scare people and draw people in. Do you think these films really needed these kind of iconic performances to stand up today? The old classic horrors from Lugosi, from the likes of Karloff?
I think, to be honest, yes, because when you take away Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, and Dwight Frye, the guy who played Renfield in Dracula, when you take away those awesome performers, there's very little left. I mean, you still have the story and you still have those fantastic sets, but the allure, the excitement is gone. So yeah, I think classic horror films benefit greatly by the personalities in them.
I agree with that.
And I think what's really interesting is then on the flip side, later, I think it's the opposite. So like our guest the other day, John Gallagher, said, you know, his first movie, he's young. What's a first movie? It's either a teen sex comedy or a horror movie. Precisely because you can do a horror movie for cheap, because in more the slasher genre later, because people like to, if there's a celebrity in it, you feel safe. And so if it's a bunch of unknowns, you don't know who's going to die. There's no, like, that person's going to save the day. And you can shoot them for cheap, with or without gore and effects. And I think precisely the opposite of the classics, because they didn't have, it's not even that they didn't have, but they chose not to use effects or whatever. Yeah, they relied on Lugosi's unblinking eyes, or Karloff's just creepy fucking eyes, or whatever. But then, you know, 50 or 30, whatever years later, it's the opposite. I think it's all, and they, you know, stole, in a good way, I mean, stole, how to use mood, atmosphere, camera work, soundtrack, all that. And let's just do that. And 100% you can make I'm way more scared when I watch a horror movie and I don't know who's in it. Like, there's no celebrities. You still need good performances. Yeah. But then you don't know, you don't have any footing. You have no way to relate to, okay, well, they're not going to kill whatever Harrison Ford, with the exception of Scream. Like, that was the joke. But anyway, yeah, I do agree. Like, that was the sell, was your star, your performance. And
it's funny what you said. When you have a well-known celebrity in a modern horror movie, that's playing it safe, because you know they're not going to kill off the star of the film. And I think that all changed with Psycho. And I remember reading, so at the time, Janet Leigh was an enormous star. And I remember when Hitchcock told the movie studio that he wanted to kill her off within the first, 15, 20 minutes? Like, the studio was appalled. The studio was like, you can't do that. She's the star of the film. She's like, her name is above the title. You cannot kill off the star of your film. No one's going to like it. But now look what happened. Psycho is like considered... Yeah, Psycho is considered one of the greatest horror movies of all time because there was that shock. There was that shock to the audience where they're like, holy shit, they just killed off the star.
Yeah.
And so early on. Yeah. So that was a real turning point there, relating back to what you said, Steve.
Yeah, that was a great idea. That you follow her. It's her story. You think it's about her and this affair she's having with the married guy and the stolen money. And that's what I love that idea of like, here's your story. And then, nope, that's your story. Like,
exactly. Whoa. Mind blown.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I wanted to touch on, that as when some of the movies you mentioned, Vanessa, that were modern horror that you liked. So you mentioned Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, Blair Witch Project, The Shining, The Craft, Psycho, as we're discussing, and Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter.
That's a fun little movie.
Yeah. What is it about these ones specifically that are why they're some of your favorite?
So Blair Witch Project, I remember I was in my last year of high school when that film came out. I think it was 1999. And that me and my friends went to go see that in the theater. And again, at the time, I was not into modern horror. My friends dragged me to that movie because I was so reluctant to see it. But I remember at the time, the internet was still very new. And they had released, the studio releasing Blair Witch Project had released a whole like online campaign for it. There was a website. And they made it seem like this was an actual real life documentary that these three people had gone into the forest to film. So I remember at the time, no one was sure if this was a true story or not, because no other film had utilized the internet like that to create an entire story behind it, an entire campaign. So yeah, we all went to this movie thinking, oh my God, did this really happen? And the way it was filmed made it look completely real. So that just that experience, I'm so happy that I listened to my friends that day and I went to go see this movie because that was such a new experience at the time. So that was awesome.
Right. What do you think of that one, Steve?
Everything she just said. Like, yes. And it's easy to like look back 21 years later because there's been so many, like with any great horror movie, the copiers kind of water down the original. And well, people see all the whatever Paranormal Activity. I like Paranormal Activity, but they get weaker and all the other stuff. And even if they do go back to the source material, because they've been shocked more or whatever, sometimes sadly it's like, so this is what started it, man. Like, everything Vanessa just said, like, what the fuck experience was that? Like, that was insane, man. And I had the same thing. I went to see it. I was in Halifax, and I remember just not knowing, and it scared the shit out of me. And then on my way home, I dared myself to start to go into this like forest because I'm an idiot, and it didn't work out. Like, I couldn't do it, right? Like, but the fact that I wanted to, I just want to say, way back to something Robert asked earlier, like, why do we go to horror? It depends on the film. But I think there's an article written by Stephen King a long time ago that I read in a creative writing class that we all have like a madness, like that we want to upset ourselves is sort of mental, because you spend your entire life looking for financial security, that special one, security, the nice house. But then I want to go out and be really upset. Like, what is wrong with us? And not only that, I go get upset by the Blair Witch Project. But then, like I said, then I'm like, that's not good enough. I'm going to go dare myself to go into the darkened woods. And I was just out of my mind for like a week. And I loved it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Blair Witch was,
What-
hey, that turned like Easy Rider turned things around in 69. 30 years later, this did.
Right. You touched on something interesting there, Steve, and I'll ask both of you. This need to be afraid, where we go through our lives trying not to be afraid. What do you think that says about humans? I mean, is there a part of us that needs to live on the edge a little bit, or what do you two think?
I think so, yeah, because come on, you're put on this earth. Once you reach adult age, you have to work full time to support yourself. You have bills to pay, you have chores to do, you have errands to run. It's so monotonous. So of course we want to look for thrills wherever we can get them.
Right.
And I mean, this may not be true for everyone, but for myself, that's exactly what it is. Everyday life is so mundane and, dare I say, boring. So when I want a thrill, I want a thrill. And that's when I go to these types of movies and this type of entertainment.
What do you think?
I agree. What she said. Exactly. I hadn't
I
thought
think
that, really.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, is I think sometimes maybe some people more than others are like some people kind of like taking so many risks in life. They sort of like the danger of, I can fall on my face here. But often that's not the case. And maybe the horror genre is that sort of fills those voids in a way, which I'd never thought of before. So I always, because like I said, I don't know much about horror films, so I always wondered, what is it about these films that really is the hook that, and that's since the beginning of cinema, really. And it's, as you said, Vanessa, it's probably evolved more than any other genre.
Yeah.
So I think that's really unique. Another film on your list was The Shining, which is a film I had over here,
the best,
which I do really like. Of course, Kubrick's only horror film. What do the two of you like about this film so much?
Okay, Steve, you go first.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. So for me, I'm gonna try to keep this short. I could do 8 hours on this movie. So when I started to go through this phase, and I really did, of wanting to scare myself, like, and so literally, like when I was a kid, stay up. I had to be midnight and dark, and then I'd put the thing on and use the VHS, and then try to be upset. But The Shining, people had warned me, and I remember like, okay, it didn't do like what The Exorcist. It didn't like fuck me up too bad. However, what it did do is I had to keep watching it like a maniac and study it and every theory about it. What is that? And then am I in The Shining? Like, I went nuts for this movie, but it wasn't because it's the scariest movie, like in a jump scare way. I think in a way, kind of like the classic ones that Vanessa was talking about, it is stylized. Obviously, it's Kubrick, so the look and the sound and all this, yes. And it's just something, the more I watch it, the more I'm like, what the fuck? And as I get older, and I actually, like, what if this really happened? Like, this is a man with responsibilities and a child, and holy shit. And I'd start to, like, watch it like it was a documentary. Like, this man's not okay. And I took it more and more seriously. And it's so disturbing. But it's also so beautiful to look at. Like, it's just, that's one of there's a few movies, but for me, and I'll end on this, The Shining, just, I am in that hotel when I watch it. Like, whoa.
Yeah, it's very immersive, very immersive. It places the audience in that hotel. So you're so right about that. And I think the scary thing about The Shining, like you said, Steve, there's not a lot of outright horror in it. It's the fact that that movie seems to be playing mind games with you. And there's so many things that are implied in every single scene. and it forces you to dig deeper and deeper. And that's why so many people love rewatching that movie, because they catch on to things every single time they watch it, and they discover something new about the story or about the characters. So it's very psychologically horrific rather than outright horrific. And I know that's what affected me the most the first time I watched it. It's, you cannot look away. And some of the scenes that you're watching are so beautifully shot. Like when they're driving at the very beginning, when they're driving to the hotel. Oh my God, the cinematography is beautiful. Your eyes are riveted to the screen. You cannot look away, and you just get deeper and deeper into this film. And it's almost like by the end of it, you're the one running from that hotel rather than just the characters. Yeah. So the build up is what makes that film. It's incredible.
Now, would this be considered like psychological horror? Because you both of you touched on what it does to your mind, right? Like, what exactly is psychological horror? If that makes sense.
I think if a horror film immerses its audience into that setting as much as The Shining does, and when it starts to play mind games with you and just makes you question everything you're seeing and everything you're hearing come out of the characters' mouths, to me, that's psychological horror. It's like fucking you up and the characters at the same time. It's putting you in their same position.
Yeah.
Right. What do you think, Steve?
Exactly that. Like, I'm such a maniac that I had this discussion with someone about science fiction and horror. I'll stick with the horror right now. But I didn't realize how much I liked horror until he was asking me, like, what are some of your favorite movies? I'm like, oh, like just movies. And I'm like, The Exorcist, The Shining, whatever. And I'm going on. He's like, so horror movies. And I'm such a weirdo. I'm like, well, to me, they're just really intense dramas. And he's like, oh, drama. So you think this shit happens? I don't know. Like, it feels so, like you say, Vanessa, immersive, that I guess it's however I qualify horror, and maybe I was going a little more, unless it's, Nightmare on Elm Street or something. And I'm like, yeah, they're horror, or I'm just so nuts that to me is just an intense, dramatic film. The Shining, Sophie's Choice, very similar. And so, yeah, in the end, yes, it's psychological in that, it just plays with your mind, right? It's just not giving you all the answers either, right? Like Friday the 13th, it's this. Done. Got it.
Right.
The Shining ends, and everyone's like, what? Wait. So was he, what? Wait, that's like.
Yeah. And then they rewatch it because they want to figure out what the hell's going on here. It's awesome.
And the answers are there.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually, Dave, Cinema Dave just made a comment. Room 237 is a great doc related to The Shining. I've not actually seen it. Have you? So Steve, it's okay. So I should watch it then.
Yes, it's so good.
Right.
He's right.
I've been meaning to see it because I think it's on Netflix, isn't it? Or I don't know if anyone watching knows. I think it is on one of the streamers, I believe. Okay. Well, if anyone knows, perhaps they can comment and let us know. A lot of what you're saying, both of you, reminds me, because one of the psychological horrors that I like a lot is Rosemary's Baby. And it played like, that's true, because it's so much of those themes of distrust and paranoia, and you never know where one, it does play with the audience's mind in terms of, are these neighbors of this young married couple, are they, they seem really nice, but they just seem a little off, and and then little by little, you find out that clearly they're part of some cult, and then and then even with Cassavetes' character later on, like, was that a dream that she had at night with sleeping with the devil while everyone's around? Was that a dream? Was it not, or was it not a dream? And then you don't know where is Cassavetes' character, Guy Woodhouse. Is he in on it? Is he not in on it? Is she crazy? Is she just paranoid? And of course, like Charles Grodin thinks she's paranoid and calls the doctor. And so, yeah, it's kind of playing with your ideas of what's really happening and what's not happening. That to me in that film and The Shining as well works so well. Am I on the right track here with like psychological horror? Is that sort of what it's about? Just misleading people in that sense, and those kind of behavior, paranoia, distrust, fear. Is that sort of where that goes in a general sense? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's anything to me that doesn't just give it away.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Until the very end, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Like
in that movie, anyways,
does say it's this, but but the journey.
But you don't know until the very end.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. To me, that's it. The journey. Anything, as Vanessa was saying earlier about like older horror films where you don't see, so it's in your mind. But even with the quote unquote, I guess psychological horror movies, it's not even a matter of them not showing you something. There's nothing to show. Like it's ideas. That's what Rosemary's Baby is. It's like you said, Robert, like it's a series of ideas, and we are Rosemary, and we're trying to piece this thing together. And I think that's what makes it a psychological horror. I guess. Yeah. Yeah,
I think that's right. It's almost like you're being led through a maze, like The Shining, exactly like The Shining at the end. It's like you're making your way slowly, or however fast you're running through a maze.
Yeah.
And once you get to the end, then everything is almost made clear to you. And that's the scary part.
That's right. Yeah. That's interesting. I always wondered why I like these two we just discussed, Rosemary's Baby and The Shining, so much. And I think because it's so much about behavior and misleading the audience here, there, and everywhere, really based on what the characters are, how they're acting, and just glimpses of truth coming out as the film goes along. And then at the very end, you find it all out. And I know Polanski also did Repulsion, which is, I only saw that once, but that's similar. And is it a similar in that kind of genre? If either of you know that movie well?
I haven't seen it. Steve, have you?
I've seen it. It's got, I'll say yes. Like Polanski has what's called his apartment trilogy, and it's Repulsion, Rosemary's Baby, and The Tenant. And they're all that take place in a kind of maze-like apartment that's a character itself. And I think that's really the only link. So I don't know if I'd call Repulsion. Yeah, I guess you could call it a psychological horror. It's definitely more open-ended than Rosemary's Baby. And, but I guess it's I just don't think of it as a horror film. I don't know what I think of it as.
Okay.
But it's similar.
Yeah. Well, that's what got him the job, right? To do Rosemary's Baby. So I thought, I haven't seen it in many years. I was curious if it was similar in that sense. So I just wanted to talk about the Criterion Channel added a number of horror films this month, mostly from the 70s. So bear with me. I'll just list some, and then perhaps the two of you can tell the audience which are the ones that you'd recommend the most. So we have Theater of Blood, Black Christmas, The Driller Killer, Don't Look Now, Season of the Witch, Nosferatu, the Herzog one of the Vampire, the Melvyn Vampire, Beware the Blob, Cat People, which we discussed, Chainsaw Massacre, which came up once, Nosferatu, which we discussed as well. Then there's this Dracula AD 1972, Peeping Tom. That one I like a lot as well, from the British. Images, which is Robert Altman. Let's Scare Jessica to Death. Vampire Lovers. Trog, The Witch Who Came from the Sea. Everybody Rides the Carousel, The Slumber Party Massacre, The Wicker Man, Death Dream, The Hills Have Eyes, Shivers, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which was your movie pick the other day, Steve, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and Rabid. So I know that's a lot to list, but do any of those pop out to you with enthusiasm, and so you got to watch that while it's on the Criterion channel? Or Vanessa, what do you think?
There's one. So horror films from the 70s is a huge blind spot for me. So many of the ones that you just said, I've never seen. But there is one on that list that's so awesome, and it's Dracula AD 1972. So that was made by Hammer. Christopher Lee was Dracula again. But instead of the film taking place like the other Hammer films do in like some Transylvanian or European village in the 1700s or 1800s, this one actually takes place in London in 1972, and it places Christopher Lee as Dracula in that setting. And it's so freaking brilliant. It's such a good movie. So that one, you guys, it's so good. So good.
That's one of the ones I didn't know. So that's fun.
You should watch it. I guarantee you will like it.
I want to see that.
Cinema Dave Dave, it is the remake one. He said, I also love the remake, and it is the remake, I believe. That's on the Criterion channel now with Donald Sutherland. Steve, what pop out for you in those movies?
Well, first, wait, the Body Snatchers is the remake?
Yes.
I watched that for the first time a week ago. It's incredible. Let's see what else. Don't Look Now, Sutherland again.
That's a great one. Yeah, Nick Rogue.
Yeah. Oh my God, Black Christmas. Kind of a Christmas movie, but
and that's a Canadian movie, right?
Canadian.
There you go. Yeah.
With a local guy, Art Hindle. He's great.
Yes. I worked with him. Yeah.
What else did you say? Rapid, David Cronenberg. That's a weird one. I love it. It's fine. You said Slumber Party Massacre, which is like the stupidest title. I watched it earlier in the summer. I'm like, all right, what is this? I actually liked it. I was shocked to find it was written and directed by a woman, because you wouldn't think that if you see this. But it's also because she's got an agenda in there. It's actually a little more clever than I thought. I don't know. You named a bunch. I can't think of them all, but there's a bunch of good movies on there. But Dracula AD, I never saw that, so I'm going to look out for that one.
Yeah, it's an awesome one.
Definitely want to see that.
Oh, I think Robert's frozen again.
Oh, is he frozen? It's just us?
Yeah, I think so.
So let me ask you really quick. How did you do? So did you miss the 70s because of horror? Because by that point you'd already discovered like slasher films, like I don't like where this is going. I don't want to get into this.
Yeah. So after I started watching films mainly from the 1930s, horror films from the 30s, then I went on to Hammer films, and those were 50s and 60s. Then I started approaching horror films from the 70s, and that's where I stopped. I'm like, oh my God, no, I can't watch this stuff. So horror films from the 70s and 80s is a huge blind spot for me.
And that's my strength. So we'd be a good
team. And there's so much that you could teach me about this stuff.
I will. I know all that stuff. That's I don't know the 30s and the 40s and the 50s that well. Hammer, I have like a box set of stuff, and I haven't watched all of it yet. But then, okay, let me just ask you, and I know you have to go. Then you've never seen The Exorcist?
I have seen The Exorcist.
Okay. Well, that's the king of, okay.
Okay, but see, can I tell you, and I'm ashamed to admit this because I know I'm going to get hate. I'm going to get hate for this. I actually found The Exorcist funny, not scary.
So did my cousin.
Oh, okay. I'm glad I'm not alone then.
No, you're not. I stopped talking to her for like a year. But
oh God.
I understand it now. I do.
I think it was
horrific. But okay.
I think it was my coping mechanism while watching that movie. It's like a nervous laughter that I was doing. I don't think I found it genuinely funny. I think I was just so uncomfortable watching this movie that all I could really do to cope was laugh. I don't know.
Listen, I get it. I rewatched it. It depends. Yeah, if I'm by myself and I've seen it 100 times, it's like if I go into it intense, it's intense. But when I watch it with a friend and she starts going off with her potty mouth, oh yeah, like I can go into a part of my brain where I'm like, listen to this little devil. Oh my. But yeah. Anyway, Robert, I see, is back. Also,
yeah, sorry about that. I think I froze up there. Was there anything else from that Criterion list that you either of you wanted to mention?
I don't think so.
We went through them all. Okay. I just had a couple of more things. So I know, Vanessa, you said an hour. Do you have to go right now?
Let's go ahead. Let's keep going. It's okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah, but feel free if you have to leave. Just please let me know. I just had a few more things. There was a question from Nathan. He had to leave, but he's going to watch the replay. Thinking of certain films like The Phantom Carriage from 1921 influencing non-horror films like The Wild Strawberries. What do you all think of horror influencing non-horror film / culture?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's a big question. I don't know.
Yeah.
Come back to me another day. I don't know.
I think a lot of non-horror films take set design cues and lighting cues from classic horror films in order to establish maybe mood or atmosphere. So I'm trying to think of an example. Take a movie like Dracula from 1931. You have those huge, gigantic sets in Dracula's castle with the huge winding staircases and the spider webs everywhere, and the light coming in through the moonlight coming in through the windows. So I think a lot of modern non-horror movies definitely take a lot of ideas from that, and you'll see that in a lot of set design and lighting.
Right.
So that's the first thing I could think of.
Is there a specific movie that comes to mind with you there, Vanessa, when you say that?
You
mentioned like Wild Strawberries, the Bergman film. I can't speak to that. I didn't sense that any kind of influence from the horror genre, but I haven't seen that in quite a while. Did anything else come to mind? Any movies that have a horror elements that were perhaps influenced from the horror genre?
I mean, I've seen dramas. Like, I always like the idea, because I'm a writer as well, and I like the idea, and I didn't do it on purpose at first, but when I'm writing a drama, it's been pointed out to me, like, oh, it feels like a horror movie. And I'm like, really? And it is something, I guess, I steal, and I can't think of an example now, but I'm almost there. But movies can take also, to add to what Vanessa said, but it's pacing. There's a sense, like if you take, I wouldn't call it a horror movie. I don't know what I'd call it. There's a movie by Nicholas Winding Refn called Only God Forgives. I love it. I know a lot of people hate it. I don't know what you'd call it. It's not a horror movie, but it feels like a horror movie because precisely it looks like The Shining. And so I think a lot of directors can just learn how to use pacing, your frame, your not even the music, but just the soundtrack, like the sound audio, to create tension, and not to be paid off in a horrific way, but in maybe a couple's having a fight, or I don't know. But there's enough things in our day-to-day, maybe not day-to-day, but our regular lives that still elicit, like, Jesus Christ, that's a terrifying thing. Like a family member dies. And I've seen directors, I'm almost there. I can use mainly the pacing of a horror film to get you just as uncomfortable as you would be, in a monster movie or a ghost movie. But in this case, the scene is going to be, whatever, your wife's telling you she had an affair, and it's and there's a move. Oh, I'm almost there.
I actually thought of one.
Go ahead, yeah, Vanessa.
So I think a good modern non-horror movie example is Lady Macbeth. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Florence, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Florence Pugh. So the same girl that was in Midsummer. And Little Women. Okay, yes. So that is an excellent example of, I think it's considered a drama, so it's not horror, but it takes a lot of cues from classic horror films in terms of the build-up, the pacing, certainly the lighting, and what's implied rather than what's like actually outright shown. So that's a fantastic movie, Lady Macbeth.
Okay. Yeah, I'm reading about that now. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And actually, there are parts of that film that are absolutely horrific, and it could be considered a horror film, but it's a drama.
Black Swan.
Oh, yes, that's a great one.
Yeah, that's just the most unnerving, intense, whatever you want to call it. And I almost would call it a horror just because of the physical experience I had watching it. But technically, you wouldn't, if Blockbuster still existed, it wouldn't be in the horror section. It would be, I guess, the drama section. But but that is another example. That's definitely I think movies you can successfully do that, right? You can take a lot from a horror film and just, I don't know if it works in a comedy, but certainly in a drama.
Yeah, and I think even the whole film noir genre took a lot from horror in terms of lighting and cinematography. I mean, I think they took, so any film noir movie that you watch, even if it's a modern noir, takes a lot of...
I think you're totally right. That's good because, like definitely I love film noir. I know a lot about that. And I hadn't put that together, but picturing it now, 100%, especially like you've seen Cat People, like the 1948.
Yeah.
That looks like it influenced like a ton of stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's the shadow, the weirdo angles, like everything. And again, Cat People didn't rely on a monster. It relied precisely on that.
You never saw a monster.
No. And genius. Mm-hmm. So well done. Oh my God. I want to just touch, if you don't have to go. You also, in your list here, you put, where is it? Tell me about, I've never seen this, 1934's The Black Cat with Lugosi and Karloff. Okay,
so hang on, I have it here. This is, so for anyone who's watching, Eureka is a British boutique Blu-ray label, and they recently put this out. So it's a 3-film bind-up of movies that Bela Lugosi starred in, and Boris Karloff is actually in 2 of them. So The Black Cat, it's Lugosi and Karloff teamed up. So when the movie studio made this film, they're basically cashing in on the success of Frankenstein and Dracula. So they're putting their 2 big horror stars together in one film. And they figured, rightly so, that if they put those 2 together, it would attract a huge audience because everyone loved Dracula and everyone loved Frankenstein. And I think a lot of publicity was created back then, showing a lot of animosity between the 2 stars, when really they got along just fine. And they had a great working relationship. They may have not been friends off screen, but they worked very well together on screen. And the chemistry between them is so bloody brilliant in The Black Cat. And it's a very eerie film. Again, it's very elegant. It's very classy. The set design is phenomenal. It's very Art Deco-ish.
It is. I saw the trailer.
Like a lot of films from the 30s were. And that's a style that I really like. And it's one of the reasons why the 1930s is my favorite film decade. It's because of those Art Deco sets and the style of even just like the credits, the text in the credits. Oh God, it's just beautiful. It's a fantastic, it's a fantastic film.
Sorry about that, guys. Oh no, is Steve gone now? I don't see Steve
we
now.
just lost him. Oh, poor guy.
Oh, I thought you were alone. I thought, oh no.
It's okay.
Just keep it going. I didn't have any. Luckily, I didn't have any other questions other than that. There was a few resources I wanted to share with people. I don't know if you know this one, Vanessa. Archive.org,
No.
which is in the Internet Library, and they have a lot of the classic horror ones that you mentioned. They do have. Oh, there he is. Sorry. They do have on there. Like Dracula and sorry, this last little bit we're all coming and going. I was mentioning to Vanessa archive.org, Steve. I don't know if you know that, but they have a lot of the old classic horror films. And like I said, the Criterion channel, all these ones from the 70s are fantastic. And I love the Criterion channel in general. The only other movie we actually didn't talk about was, I know that you love so much, is The Exorcist, Steve. I mean, where does that fall? Does that fall under just pure horror?
We talked about it while you were away.
Okay, good.
I feel like we're playing psychological games with our audience.
Yeah.
It's all part of the thing. Yeah. Because we keep disappearing and coming back, and yeah.
I know. It's so weird.
But yeah, we touched upon The Exorcist while you were gone.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'll watch it on the replay.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that I'd, you know what, my last question would be if someone only had one Halloween movie to watch this month, what would it be for both of you?
Does it have to be horror?
I guess anything related to Halloween, really.
Okay, then I would recommend Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. It's comedy horror.
Okay.
It's comedy horror. So I'm going to recommend that one.
And everyone.
It's got everything and it's so fucking good. So watch that.
I got to go with her. That's very good. For like fun Halloween, I wrote that down. I wanted to talk about that movie. I forgot. That's a wonderful movie. And it's got all your Universal classic and all the tropes you want in the castle and it's funny. That's a really good one.
I haven't seen that one.
I'd say if you want horror, Halloween. 1978
Right.
Halloween. Yeah.
Would that be your pick then, Steve? If you had one movie to watch this month?
For
that's
Halloween specifically and not like the best horror movie, yeah, I'd go with Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein because it's fun. And the 78 John Carpenter Halloween because it's fun but scary.
Robert, what would yours be?
Yeah. Probably Rosemary's Baby. I'm also partial because Cassavetes is like my god. So just the fact that Cassavetes is in it mixed with Halloween, perfect. You know, that would definitely be my pick. But not only that, I think it's a really good movie, and I tend to be more interested in psychological films that we've discussed, The Shining and Rosemary's Baby. But I also really like some of the classic ones we mentioned, particularly Frankenstein from the 1930s. But yeah, if I had to pick one, definitely Rosemary's Baby, which I believe is on Canopy. Is it, Steve? I think.
I'll look. I don't know.
I think it is. Yeah. Because I know Canopy has a number of horror films. I think The Omen is on there. I don't know if either of you mentioned The Omen while I was away. That's a really good one as well. With Gregory Peck and Lee Remick.
Is that the one where the son is possessed by the devil? Or
yes.
Okay. I haven't seen that one in years, but I should rewatch it.
And yes,
that's another one I really enjoy.
So it's
on Canopy. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So for those of you watching, and most of our audience is in America and Canada. And I know Canopy is available in both countries, and of course, and the Criterion channel and archive.org, which has a lot of the classic horror films that we've discussed. Was there anything else either of you wanted to mention before we wrap up, or?
No,
No?
I'm good.
Steve, anything? No? Okay,
No.
great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for watching.
Thank you,
Your
Vanessa. That was
great
awesome.
comments. Yeah, this was great from Cinema Dave and Nathan Jones. Thank you so much for your questions and comments, and Ian Banks as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I'm definitely going to check out a lot of these movies that everyone has recommended, and as well as given me, someone who knows very little about this genre, a lot more insight into how it's evolved and how the subgenres have evolved, and why we kind of are interested in these kind of movies. Actually, you know what? Before we go, there's one movie that I really like was with Exorcist 3. I don't know if either of you have seen that. That's
I
fantastic.
like that a lot too.
With Jason Scott.
I actually
That's
like
great. And
so it's the third one? Exorcist 3, you said? Okay.
The second one's
third one is
third one's a good
the second one's
follow-up.
Okay. I'll give it a shot.
And that's a little more psychological in the sense that because it's about the demon going into a guy, and the guy becomes a serial killer. But that's just the general plot.
That's on
but
Prime.
You know what? A lot of what
Prime. It's on Prime.
It's on Prime. Okay.
Is that on Prime? But you know what I really liked about that one is touching on something Vanessa had said, where a lot of those classic horror films, they maybe wouldn't hold up now if they didn't have Lugosi and Karloff, those great performances. That one really relies on the acting, particularly not only George C. Scott, but the guy who plays the demonic possession. I forget what's his name?
Brad Dourif. He was
What's his
in
name
One
again?
Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
That's right. He's so good, and he's
very good.
terrifying. No makeup, nothing. Just when he's talking, he's scary as. So to me, it's one of the greatest performances I've seen in a horror film. I mean, it's unbelievable how scary he is.
You sold me. You sold me on it. I'm going to watch it. Okay.
There you go. So that's another one I'd highly recommend. So Vanessa, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time today to discuss Halloween films.
No, thank you, both of you guys.
No, you're welcome. And we definitely love to have you back. You can find Vanessa's blog, superveebs.com, where she talks about movies and lifestyle and some personal stories as well. Some of them Condo one I thought was sort of a horror film.
You know what? It could have been a horror film.
Yeah, totally. So check out her blog. She has a lot of great stuff there, and you can also find her on Twitter at Vanessa Buttino. So it's Buttino, and check out what she has to say there. Well, thanks again. And if this is your first time watching, and if you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing by clicking on the subscribe button, which is in the description box below. Okay. Well, again, thanks so much to both of you, and we'll see you both next time. All right.
Guys.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye,
see you later. See ya.